Terminally ill wife sees her husband jumping for joy upon finding out she's going to die. But when he opens the will, he's shocked. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. Maria had always believed in love. It was her guiding light, the foundation of everything she cherished. Born into a modest family, Maria was a woman of simple joys, finding happiness in the small things. When she met Ricardo, she thought she'd found the love of her life. He was charming, confident, and had an air of stability that soothed her worries. With time, they married, and Maria poured her heart into creating a life that would nurture and support them both. She believed her husband was her partner, someone who would cherish her as much as she cherished him. Years passed, and Maria, who had once been content with the little things, found herself and Ricardo in a comfortable life. Through hard work and prudent saving, they had amassed a significant fortune, enough to afford them peace of mind and dreams for the future. They weren't wealthy by society's standards, but for Maria, it was more than she had ever imagined. Then everything changed. The sickness started as an inconvenience, a cough that wouldn't go away, fatigue that lingered. But it quickly turned into something much darker. Visits to the doctor led to tests, and the results confirmed her worst fears: terminal cancer. The doctors were kind but honest, preparing her for a battle she wouldn't win. Despite the grim prognosis, Maria was determined to make the most of her remaining time, cherishing every day, every precious moment, and every last memory she could build with Ricardo. She clung to the hope that their love would carry her through, that Ricardo would be by her side until the very end. But love has a way of revealing itself in the most unexpected moments. As Maria began her treatments, she started to notice subtle changes in Ricardo's behavior. He no longer lingered by her bedside with comforting words. Instead, he grew distant, often muttering about how exhausting it was to care for her, as though her illness was an inconvenience. The gentle man she had married seemed to transform before her very eyes, his warmth replaced by something cold and indifferent. It wasn't long before the truth surfaced, and it happened on a night that Maria would never forget. Ricardo believed she was asleep, lost in her drug-induced haze from the latest round of treatments. She lay quietly, her body weakened but her mind still sharp, listening as he spoke on the phone in the next room. The words he whispered chilled her more deeply than the sickness coursing through her veins. "It's almost over," Ricardo said with a dark satisfaction. "Can you believe it? She's finally going to be gone, and then everything is mine." Maria's heart froze. She could barely breathe as the realization struck her. Ricardo was eagerly awaiting her death, not as a release from her suffering, but as a gateway to the life and wealth he had always desired. The man she loved, the man she trusted, was planning to celebrate her passing. The betrayal shattered her. It wasn't merely the sickness that threatened her life. It was the crushing weight of knowing that the man she adored was ready to rejoice at her death. Each day that followed was a struggle, not only against her illness but against the agony of Ricardo's betrayal. He would bring her meals, tend to her when the nurses weren't there, and still she could see it in his eyes. A flicker of impatience, a faint smile he tried to hide whenever her condition seemed to worsen. It was during one of those dark, silent nights that Maria made a decision. She may not have control over her sickness, but she could take control of what happened when she was gone. She would not leave her life's earnings to a man who had already abandoned her in spirit. She would create a legacy, one that would live on long after she had passed, and one that would carry a message for Ricardo, a final act of justice. Maria called her attorney, a trusted family friend, and quietly rewrote her will. Her savings, assets, and the small home she loved would go to a humble, kind-hearted caregiver who had shown her compassion when she needed it most. This caregiver had comforted her when the treatments became unbearable, bringing her moments of peace in a world of pain. Maria felt confident that this person would honor her memory in ways Ricardo never could. But Maria didn't stop there. With her attorney's guidance, she set up a charitable fund, one dedicated to women who found themselves trapped in unhealthy or abusive marriages. She knew too well how devastating it could be to love someone who betrayed that love, and her last wish was to give those women the support and courage to escape and find freedom. As her final act, Maria wrote a letter to be delivered to Ricardo after her death. In it, she shared her love, her pain, and the depth of his betrayal. She poured her heart into every word, ensuring that Ricardo would feel the full weight of what he had done. She wanted him to know that she had seen through him, that she understood his cruelty and his selfishness, and that her last act on this earth would be one of justice, not for herself, but for others who needed hope. With each day that passed, Maria grew weaker, but a fierce determination filled her heart. She found solace in knowing that, while she could not change her fate, she could control the legacy she left behind. She could leave this world on her own terms, with a final gesture that would reflect her true values: compassion, resilience, and justice. Ricardo remained oblivious to her plan, still assuming that he would inherit everything when her battle finally ended. He played the part of the grieving husband, even though his true thoughts were focused on the life he would lead once she was gone. Little did he know, Maria was preparing the greatest shock of his life, a testament that would leave him with nothing but regret and the knowledge that he had lost the one person who truly cared for him. As Maria's condition worsened, she took solace in the quiet satisfaction of her decision. She had always been a quiet, gentle soul, someone who avoided confrontation. But now, in the face of betrayal, she had found a strength she never knew she possessed. Her body may have been weakening, but her spirit was stronger than ever. When the day finally came, Maria passed away peacefully, surrounded by the few people who truly cared for her. Ricardo, oblivious to the impending storm, felt a strange sense of relief, his mind already racing with plans for the wealth he believed was now his. But as he would soon learn, Maria's love had a strength that even death could not conquer, a strength that would leave him reeling, empty-handed, and forever haunted by her final act of love and justice. The day after Maria's passing, Ricardo wore a carefully curated expression of grief. He took deep breaths, braced himself, and maintained a stoic composure, though inside, he felt a perverse kind of freedom. To him, Maria's death marked the beginning of a life unencumbered by her illnesses, medical bills, and constant need for care. While others mourned her kindness and strength, Ricardo saw only the end of what he had considered a burden, an inconvenience to his own plans and desires. At Maria's funeral, close friends, family members, and the caregiver who had become like a daughter to her gathered to say goodbye. Ricardo played the part of the grieving widower well, offering a few well-timed sighs and solemn nods to those who expressed their condolences. He knew what they were thinking, the same thing he had been repeating to himself in the weeks before her passing. How lucky she had been to have someone like him, a man who had stayed by her side through her darkest days. In his mind, he was owed not just her gratitude but also her entire estate. As the ceremony drew to a close, the attorney approached Ricardo, holding a thin envelope with a wax seal on the back. His hands were steady, but there was an unreadable look in his eyes. He gave Ricardo a small, respectful nod as he handed over the envelope, explaining that Maria had left detailed instructions in her will, with a personal letter for him as well. Ricardo accepted the envelope, struggling to conceal his impatience. A will meant access to her accounts, the deed to the house, and all the assets she'd accumulated over their years together. He hadn't given her the credit she deserved for building a stable financial foundation. Maria had been careful with every penny, saving when others might have spent frivolously, securing a future she'd never get to enjoy. He viewed the attorney's presence as the final formality before he could begin claiming his new life, free from obligations. After the guests left, Ricardo retreated to his study, eager to read through the will. As he opened the envelope, the faint scent of Maria's favorite lavender perfume wafted up, a subtle touch she'd likely intended to add one last personal touch. For a moment, an unanticipated pang of guilt hit him. He shook it off, dismissing it as a trick of the senses, a lingering memory of her presence. He refocused on the will's contents, flipping through the pages, scanning eagerly for the section about assets. The first paragraph was a standard statement of her identity, her date of birth, and other formalities. Then, it moved on to the section he had been waiting for, the division of her assets. Ricardo's eyes skimmed over the words, and as he reached the details, a chill crept over him. I, Maria Gomez, hereby bequeath all my possessions and assets, including my bank accounts, investments and property, to those who have shown me kindness, respect, and love in my final days. Ricardo felt a cold sweat form on his forehead. His grip on the paper tightened as he read the next line. My house and all personal belongings contained within it shall be transferred to the ownership of Rosa Martinez, a woman whose care and compassion sustained me when others could not. It is my wish that Rosa continue to live in this home, filling it with the same warmth she brought into my life. He paused, stunned. Rosa Martinez, the caregiver. His mind raced back to the countless times he dismissed her as just the help, someone beneath notice, invisible in her plain uniform as she tended to Maria's every need. She'd been nothing more than a shadow in the background to him, a reminder of the burdens he had to bear. And yet, here was Maria leaving the house, their house, to this woman he barely even acknowledged. Disbelief turned into frustration, his face twisting as he continued reading, desperately searching for some portion left for him, some part of the estate he could claim. Page after page, his eyes darted down the lines, each one leaving him with more questions and a deepening sense of betrayal. He thought of confronting the attorney, demanding an explanation for this injustice, but he realized quickly that it was no mistake. This was intentional. Maria had planned it, ensured it, and made it legally binding. And then, as he turned the last page, he found her letter. It was a handwritten note, simple but heartfelt, her familiar handwriting filling the page with a mixture of elegant strokes and soft curls. There, in her own words, Maria shared her final thoughts, a letter not to the man she once loved but to the man he had become. My dearest Ricardo, by the time you read this, I will have already moved on from this life, a journey I faced with mixed emotions, knowing that I was leaving behind both love and betrayal. I write this letter not to scorn you but to share my truth, and to let you know that I have seen through the lies and the facade you wore so well. I loved you with all my heart. I gave everything to you. My trust, my devotion, my hope for a future together. Yet, as the illness took hold of me, I began to see the cracks in the image I had of you. Your smiles became fewer, your touches colder, and your words empty. In my most vulnerable moments, you treated my life as if it were a sentence you were counting down, as though my suffering was a burden you were anxious to shed. I know of the joy you felt at the thought of my passing, the freedom you imagined once I was gone. It was not an easy truth to accept, but I took solace in knowing that I could leave this world without the weight of your deceit on my soul. I realized then that love, true love, is built on respect and compassion, two things you had long abandoned. So, I chose to leave my legacy to those who showed me love in my darkest hours. Rosa, who held my hand when I felt alone, will take care of the home we once shared. She will bring life back to its rooms, filling them with the laughter and warmth that you, in all your coldness, could never sustain. And to those women who find themselves in a place I once stood, in a marriage where their spirits are shattered by betrayal, I dedicate the remainder of my wealth. Through a foundation in my name, they will find the help they need to reclaim their freedom, to escape lives trapped by empty promises and hollow vows. Ricardo, you may think of this as punishment, but it is, in fact, my final act of love for you too. I am leaving you the chance to face yourself, to look in the mirror and see the man you have become. It is my hope that you take this time to rebuild, to reflect, and perhaps, to become someone worthy of the love I once offered. Farewell, Ricardo. I leave you now, free of regret, and at peace with the choice I made. Maria. The room felt as if it had shrunk, the air heavy and stifling as Ricardo stood there, clutching the letter with trembling hands. His heart raced, his mind numb with the shock and finality of her words. He had thought he would feel triumph, relief, but instead he felt as if he had been hollowed out, left with nothing but the bitter taste of regret. Maria's letter was not a simple farewell. It was her reckoning, a final declaration that stripped him of everything he thought he was owed. She had left him, not with wealth or freedom, but with a mirror, a reflection of the man he had become, forcing him to confront the emptiness of his own soul. Ricardo sat in stunned silence, Maria's letter slipping from his hands and floating gently to the floor. His heart thudded in his chest as her words echoed in his mind, each sentence a painful reminder of what he had lost, not just her wealth but something far more profound. For years, he had looked at Maria as an investment, something he could profit from in the end. Now he realized how deeply he had misjudged her, underestimated her strength, and most painfully, how thoroughly she had seen through him. Days passed, and Ricardo's world began to unravel. He had once walked through life with an air of confidence, assured of his own importance. But Maria's words, along with the realization that she had outwitted him, left him adrift, directionless. He tried to deny the truth, to convince himself that he had been wronged, but deep down, he couldn't escape the gnawing shame that clawed at him relentlessly. Soon after the will was read, Rosa, the caregiver, arrived to settle into her new home. His former home, a place he had once ruled with silent resentment. Watching her move in was like rubbing salt into his wounds, a reminder of Maria's final judgment. He had once dismissed Rosa, barely giving her a second glance. But now he saw her differently. She was a living testament to Maria's kindness, a woman who had been by her side through her suffering, while he had merely counted down the days. On Rosa's first morning in the house, Ricardo felt compelled to confront her, perhaps seeking some twisted sense of validation. But as he approached her, he found himself hesitating. Rosa was watering Maria's plants, her touch gentle, her face peaceful, as though she had always belonged there. Ricardo realized that he didn't belong in that home anymore. Maria had stripped him of that privilege. Feeling lost, Ricardo left and wandered the streets of their neighborhood. He felt like a stranger in his own life, haunted by the realization that he had nowhere to go, no purpose to cling to. He drifted aimlessly for hours, until he found himself standing in front of a building he hadn't noticed before. A modest office with a simple sign that read, Maria Gomez Foundation for Women in Need. He froze, staring at the sign in disbelief. Maria's words rushed back to him. Her wish to help women escape lives shackled by unfaithful or abusive relationships. Here it was, her final act of defiance against him, embodied in this foundation. Her legacy for those who deserved a chance to rebuild their lives. And Ricardo understood with gut-wrenching clarity that this was her final rebuke to him, a declaration of her strength and resilience. Unable to resist, he walked inside. The receptionist looked up, welcoming him with a polite smile, oblivious to the storm raging within him. The walls were decorated with pictures of women and children, each photograph captioned with a success story. A woman who had escaped a life of hardship, a child who had found a safe home, a family given a second chance. Each story felt like a blow to Ricardo, a reminder that Maria had dedicated her legacy to a cause he had never valued. In the center of the room, a photograph of Maria caught his eye. It was taken in her healthier days, her smile radiant, her eyes filled with a kindness he had once taken for granted. Below her photo was a plaque, engraved with her favorite quote, "The strength of a woman lies in her heart, and her kindness is her legacy." Ricardo felt a shiver run through him. For years, he had thought himself superior, stronger, and more capable. But Maria had shown a strength he couldn't fathom, a quiet, unyielding resilience that had allowed her to face betrayal with grace and to create a legacy of compassion in the face of cruelty. As he stood there, lost in thought, a woman approached him. She was young, holding the hand of a little girl who looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. The woman introduced herself as one of the foundation's beneficiaries. She thanked him, assuming he was there to support the foundation that had given her and her daughter a chance to escape an abusive home. Ricardo's throat tightened, but he managed to nod, unable to find the words to correct her assumption. The woman's gratitude, her sincerity, cut through him, leaving him feeling small and hollow. After leaving the foundation, Ricardo spent days locked in his empty apartment, a stark contrast to the warmth and life that had once filled the home he had shared with Maria. He could barely look at himself in the mirror, haunted by the image of Maria's face, the kindness in her eyes now a silent accusation. Each night, he lay awake, reliving her words, imagining the life he might have had if he had valued her instead of the fortune he once craved. But self-pity and guilt couldn't bring Maria back. And over time, Ricardo realized that he had only two choices: to let the weight of his actions crush him, or to find a way to honor the woman he had wronged. Driven by desperation and a newfound understanding of his own emptiness, Ricardo made a decision he would never have considered before. He returned to the Foundation, not as a visitor this time, but as a volunteer. At first, his motives were unclear, even to himself. Was he seeking redemption, or merely a way to ease his own guilt? But as he began working with the women and children, hearing their stories, and witnessing the courage they displayed in rebuilding their lives, something shifted within him. He saw glimpses of Maria in each of them: the strength, the kindness, the will to survive. And with each passing day, he began to understand what Maria had tried to teach him. Working at the Foundation became his penance, his way of confronting the man he had been and honoring the woman he had lost. Ricardo never spoke of Maria to anyone there, keeping his connection to her a private, unspoken truth. Instead, he poured his energy into helping those she had chosen to leave her legacy with, giving back to the community that had supported her mission. In time, he found himself humbled, stripped of the arrogance and entitlement that had once defined him. He had lost everything he thought mattered, only to discover that Maria's final act had given him a new purpose. Through her betrayal, she had forced him to face his own emptiness, and in doing so, she had given him the chance to rebuild, to find a path defined by kindness and humility rather than greed. Years later, as Ricardo watched a young mother receive her first set of keys to a new apartment provided by the Foundation, he felt a strange sense of peace. He would always carry the weight of Maria's final lesson, a reminder of the love he had betrayed and the life he had lost. But now, he understood that this was his legacy, his way of honoring the woman who had shown him the depths of his own humanity. Maria's memory lived on, not through wealth or property, but through every woman and child who walked through the doors of the Foundation she had created. Ricardo knew he could never undo the past, but in dedicating himself to Maria's mission, he had finally found a measure of redemption, a way to make peace with the woman he had wronged and to carry forward the love he had once taken for granted. And so Maria's legacy endured, a testament to her strength, her kindness, and the quiet, unyielding power of a woman who had shown the world, and Ricardo, that true love leaves a mark that can never be erased. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story.